Hey everyone, welcome back to The High Ground, a bi-weekly video series in which I'm going to be interviewing founders that really span all categories in the California cannabis market. I felt that with everything that I'm learning from Headset, talking to so many different founders in the California market, this has been a really tough couple years as we've entered into a legal market. And so what we're doing on this video series is going to be talking to a founder from each of the 9 categories that we have in cannabis. So beverages, capsules, concentrates, etc. And we're going to learn their stories. We're going to learn what it's like working in the California market. And then I'm going to bring in a lot of the data that we're seeing from Headset so we can have a really robust conversation. We kicked off the first episode with Alexi Chialtas, who's the co-founder and CEO of Wonder, one of my favorite beverage brands in California. And that was just a really insightful conversation. I've known Alexi for 6 years when we were working in ad tech together. And we just got to learn a lot about why he started Wonder and, having this alcohol replacement. I think it's something that's so important today as a lot of people are going to Cali sober and still wanting opportunities to really socialize with people without having alcohol. So anyways, take a listen to that episode if you want to learn a little bit more about the beverage market, what we're seeing from Headset's end in terms of the data and the trends in California. So for today's episode, I interview Chris Emerson, and he is the founder and CEO of Level. Chris has a really fascinating background. He is a PhD. His career path led him to working in small molecular science. And so as he was working in, picking his path of where he wanted to go and working for either a pharmaceutical company or working with other researchers, he decided to create a cannabis capsule or tablet, which is Level, which is now the #1 capsule or tablet in California. They're doing some incredible things. And so in this conversation with Chris, we really dive into the capsule category. What does growth look like? This is a category that has a lot of dominant players that are really making up market share. So we dive into a bit of that. And you'll get to hear a little bit more about his story. So before we get into that episode, I just wanted to kind of set the tone for what's been going on in the capsules category over the last year. And so I know everyone thinks I have all this data memorized in my head, but I do not. So I'm going to read from some of the key trends that we've been seeing. But before I do, just as a reminder for anyone who's new to this and is wondering where the data is coming from, this is all data that's coming directly from the point of sale system, within the dispensary. So the dispensaries are hooked up using Headset's retail software. And then what we do on the back end is we're aggregating all of this data in real time. And then we forecast it up for each of the markets that we have saturation in, which is 15 different markets. And we can start reporting in real time what people are purchasing and who is purchasing. And so again, we're talking just about the California market. Every market is so nuanced. And if people are finding value in this video series, then next season, we'll look at interviewing 9 different founders in a different market and really start to see how do trends differ in California versus another market. So, okay, let's talk about what we've been seeing in 2021 in California as it pertains to the capsules category, which includes tablets that we're going to be talking about today. So just as a whole, 2021, this was an incredible year for sales in California. For legal adult use sales, we did over $5 billion. And the capsules and tablets category accounted for 1.5% of total retail sales in California. And that was just over $80 million in total revenue, which was 27% growth over the $63 million that we brought in 2020 for the capsules category. So this category is currently ranking 7 out of the 9 categories that we're tracking at Headset in terms of revenue contribution. And just as a comparison point, Flower obviously is the biggest category of sales. This is the #1 category in California, making up $2.2 billion in sales in 2021. So that'll give you some context for how big the market is for capsules currently. And what I found really interesting when looking at the data is that the top 3 brands in the capsule category are Level, Breeze Mints, and then ABX, Absolute Extracts, which is a CannaCraft portfolio company. And combined, all 3 of these companies are making up 74% of the total category sales. So really interesting to see how more companies are going to come in and create tablets and capsules over the next couple of years. But without further ado, let's talk to Chris and learn a little bit more about his experience at Level and all the great things that they're working on. Thank you for joining us. And next week, we're going to be talking to Claudio Miranda, who, full transparency, is my partner. And he has been on quite the journey in the concentrate category. And so next week, we'll be exploring concentrates. So let's get into it and chat with Chris. Okay, awesome. Chris, it's so good to officially meet you here. Where are you based right now?
Currently, well, first off, yeah, great to meet you, Jocelyn. Really appreciate this opportunity. Looking forward to this. Currently, we're based in Santa Rosa, California.
Okay, right on. Yeah, it's funny. So 2 weeks ago, I kicked off. This is entirely new podcast, and I'm really just, as you know, going out talking to founders, creating a product in each of the 9 categories that we have in California. And so I was talking to Alexi last week, and he's like, "Hey, who are you going to be interviewing for capsules?" He's like, "You should talk to someone from Level," and he had so much nice things to say about you. And I was like, "Well, funny enough, I'm trying to get in touch with Chris because he's the first person on my list that I wanted to talk to." And then I swear the way the universe works, it is just the most like the universe always provides. But then the following day, I get an email from Jim Walsh, who I just love, great guy. And he just sent me, he's like, "Hey, I want to send you like all of Level stuff," and sent me your beautiful little care package. And so I was like, oh my gosh, all right, the universe is aligning itself so that I can talk to Chris. And here we are now. So thank you so much for making time. I think people are going to be really interested in what you have to say, just being the leading capsule brand in the country at this point, according to our data. So very excited about that.
Yeah, us as well. Yeah, it's an exciting time in cannabis, especially for those of us that have been operating in it for quite some time now. So,
Yeah.
excited to see where this continues to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so let's just get into it. So you have a fascinating background. So, PhD, I understand you could have taken a couple different routes with your career, going and working potentially for pharmaceutical companies or potentially training other scientists. So, can you just talk about how did you get started in cannabis? What has your career journey been? What is your ethos kind of as you're building out Level?
Yeah. So I have a PhD in small molecule chemistry. So most people who get that training, they either go do drug discovery and manufacturing for pharma, or they train the next generation of scientists. And neither of those were things I really wanted to do. I just had an obsession for small molecules and the interaction between molecules and, human consciousness. And so that kind of sent me down that path. Ended up in grad school, obsessed with synthesis, XYZ. But I always had a bent. I wanted to be an entrepreneur as well. And, as I finished my PhD, and then I was doing a postdoc at Stanford, and I never understood how I could reconcile these two pathways because they seemed to be very different at the time. So, yeah, I was doing a postdoc at Stanford. I was, doing a lot of different work towards, like a pharma pathway. I was living in San Francisco at the time. The city was on fire. This is early 2012. So, Uber was coming online and Lyft, and you were just seeing this explosion of tech. And I was done with
Mm-hmm.
bench science. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to quit my postdoc. I'm just going to go and figure out what's next in life, right? And through a series of serendipitous events after that, ended up on a medical cannabis farm on a ridge on the coast of Mendocino. Slept in a tent in the redwoods next to a trim yurt for 3 months. The first
No
night,
way.
in, I was like, okay, I just threw my life away. I spent 12 years trying to get to where I was. I just quit. Now I'm on this weed farm. And then I was able to take this experience and then the knowledge that I have, and was like, there is a future of human health that is untapped. And you could tell that things were moving that direction, right? There was just energy not only in San Francisco, but you knew regulation was coming down the line at some point. And so I got back to San Francisco, got a job as a chief chemist working on novel antiviral therapeutics at a small biotech. And then at weekends and nights, I was learning everything I could about what did we know about cannabis scientifically in peer-reviewed journals, what had been done in clinical trials, saw where the industry was and saw that there was a need for standardized products, new form factors, new ways of thinking about cannabinoids and their impact on what that could have for humans, moving forward. And
And
two failed,
what year was
yeah,
that in? When all
2012.
okay. So
That was in
and was
2012.
there a lot of were there a lot of other, capsule companies on the market at that point, or were you really pioneering this way?
Yeah, and I mean we didn't have tablets on the or capsules on the market at that point too. I tried to get in the industry in like 2013 using sublingual sprays of whole plant extracts, and the industry wasn't ready for it, and I wasn't ready for it, and so I had two wonderful failed attempts at trying to get in the industry. But that was also while I was developing this whole thesis around effects-based cannabis or targeted effects from emergent cannabinoid formulations not accessible from the plant alone. And then in 2015, I found two co-founders that bought into this idea and this thesis I had. They helped seed the company financially, and it's been a crazy 6.5 year ride since.
Yeah, yeah, these last couple of years in particular in California have not been an easy ride. So, major kudos to anyone, any entrepreneurs on this journey. So, so I'm curious. Okay, so having been focused on capsules or tablets this entire time, when I'm looking at kind of what's been going on over the past couple of years, the category is experiencing growth. It's 27% growth is what we saw last year. And I guess just for comparison to other categories, concentrates, for example, was growing at 19% growth, and then beverages 50% growth, just for kind of comparison there. I'm curious. So, what are you guys seeing at level? What are your thoughts on just industry growth in California and capsules and tablets as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think 1.5% of the overall market in California is this subcategory. So I think it grew 0.1% last year, right? 1.4 to 1.5. So it's a much smaller category. We think that there's continual steady growth. We don't think we're going to see exponential growth in this category. It requires a lot of education and consumer experience, and it is still pretty new for most people to wrap their heads around. So we
Mm-hmm.
think that it will continue to grow, and it will keep grabbing more market share and really fit into you know um, a specific use cases for individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm definitely curious to talk about those use cases. But first, one of the other interesting things that I was finding is the category is really dominated by just a handful of players. So you guys are number one in California. Breeze Mints would be the second biggest brand, and then ABX, their soft gel capsules. And between the three of y'all, you're making up 74% of the total category sales, which is just incredible comparative to some other CPG industries, but that's very, very high. So I'm just curious with that, why do you think that is? What makes the ProTab so unique? And actually, maybe we could start there. Can you talk a little bit about ProTabs and the different lines that you have, and why you think they're
Mhm.
resonating so much with consumers?
Yeah, ProTab, I mean, it took us several years to develop this. We actually have quite a bit of IP that we developed to build this product. So this isn't something you can just get off the shelf. So the innovation we put into it to develop it helps to differentiate it. And that's what allows us to really test this thesis around effects-based cannabis. So when I first started talking about effects-based cannabis, people would look at us and say, like, "Are you guys in outer space? What are you talking about? What is it, a sativa or an indica?" And so we've learned over the years, we've really had to dial back our language because fundamentally, and whether or not you agree with what does sativa or indica mean, say from a plant perspective, I think canonically as an industry we say, look, sativas are uplifting, indicas are, they're chill and they tend to be more body and less cerebral, right? So just trying to get people to agree on these two effects of a sativa
Mm-hmm.
and indica has been really challenging. And so part of the point of the ProTab was, okay, well, let's get these on the market and see if we can help establish a language for how we even communicate with consumers and potential consumers. And so their anticipated or expected experiences matches what we are giving them. And I think that was a huge component of it. And in order for us to do that, we had to build the correct delivery vehicle. And that delivery vehicle is a ProTab. So we can do anything we want in a ProTab. We can change dosage very easily. We can make combinatorial um, formulations with it. So we have a wide range of formulations. So it's a very flexible delivery vehicle that we created, but it's what we put inside that matters. And so that's one of the reasons I think that we've had such success with it is because when we came to the market in 2018, we launched these on essentially July 1st, 2018. So the whole market totally contracted. everyone's freaking out because there's no
Mhm.
retailers. The whole market's in shambles. And you have a lot of manufacturers who are saying, we're going to go sell flowers so we can, try and weather the storm. We took a different approach. We're like, we're going to triple down on this brand new product class, and we are going to go out and try and just focus on this one thing. And fortunately, that and a series of other, bets we've made have paid off. And um, in the ProTab, and then it's been through this series of several years of just pushing on this concept. I think that's really helped to establish it as, this foundational part of our subcategory.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I find really interesting about your brand and what I'm assuming from your strategy. And this is something Alexi and I were talking about, and he mentioned the focus that y'all have. You're very focused on what you're doing. And I'm curious kind of to build off that. So ABX is also in the third biggest brand, as I mentioned. And, obviously Cannagraft is touching every single category, right? So they've got a product in every category, vertically integrated. So there's a lot that they're doing. And I'm curious if you can attribute any of your success to the fact that you're just so focused on, because how many SKUs do you have?
I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know, 50 plus, right?
Yeah,
Within this form factor.
yeah. But is there anything, do you think that there's anything to that focus? And
Yeah. Yes, I do. I do. I think, and when I founded this company, our intention was to try and run similar to a lean startup, right? So there was all this influence out from, software and other tech companies of how you build something lean and run a lean startup and be able to do it on a minimal amount of capital and XYZ. Doesn't work very well in a, highly regulated consumer product industry, but we still use that philosophy. So we've run very scrappy, we've run very lean, and the way we do that is like we are going to focus on one thing. And we were able to do that, I think, because our mission hasn't changed. Like it is still about effects-based cannabis and proving this thesis. And we're still a long way from even proving if this thesis is going to, play out. But it's the thing that drives us, and it's our mission. So that's allowed us to hyper focus on one thing and just be the best at it. And we had no idea what the market dynamics would be getting to this point, but it has worked out in our favor to this time. And so we aren't, up to this time, we haven't gone into other categories. We aren't looking at other things. We just wanted to absolutely own what we were doing because we want to really prove this thesis. And fortunately, the market has been tolerant as it's now matured, to allow us to kind of do things in real time and experiment with this, with building a company this way in the industry.
and okay, so when you're saying the effects-based marketing or effects-based products, so I'm just so okay for people to see. So lights out. I just love your marketing and branding, by the way. I think this is really well done. Recover and then boost, and this is your ProTab Plus line. But so I'm just curious. So of these different products, like what is really resonating of the effects with consumers? Are you finding people are interested in help with sleep? Is it the boost, the energy that they're looking for? What is kind of selling most for you guys?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you overall, indica sells the best for us over the whole course of 4 years in this space. Sativa is a close second, and now we just launched those 3 months ago. This differentiated ProTab Plus line, and we're seeing lights out for sleep. People are definitely resonating. That's selling a bit better than Boost, which you would use for energy. So I think fundamentally sleep is just such a huge issue for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the front runner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did want to circle back real quick because you had asked another question there about kind of the consolidation in our category between us, Breeze, and Absolute at
Yeah.
74% of the share.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has come, A, we have a small category, but B, you know, there's a few things. We saw a ton of consolidation in this category over the past year and a half. And I think through that, we're seeing a bifurcation in pricing tiers. And so we're seeing a lot of the middle pricing tier go away. And now there's an established, okay, there's an upper tier, which is where Level would sit, I'd say. And then there's more of a value add brand, which is kind of where Breeze is filling in the niche. And then Absolute's kind of, bridging the gap a little bit depending on their SKU. But I think we're really seeing that in our sector, and I think it represents overall where the overall market's probably headed. Just
Mm-hmm.
we experience it maybe a little more sharply because it is such a small segment at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And what are your kind of thoughts on the consolidation? Is that at all attributed to just how tough it is in California to run a cannabis company, or what are your thoughts on why that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have enough time on this podcast. No.
I know that's a big question.
It's yeah, I think everything. We have draconian regulation that is just crushing. There's the whole taxation issue, combating an illicit market, and then we experienced. Fortunately, we got a huge bounce. When the first shelter in places started happening with COVID, we were deemed essential. Amazing, right? Because this industry would probably have not made it had we not. So we were deemed essential, and then we see very significant growth through 2020, but it was artificially inflated, right? People were at home, there was disposable income. People weren't spending money in other ways. There was stimulus. And then in 2021, I think all of a sudden now we see the market correction. And so we saw an extinction event for a lot of operators who couldn't manage the transition and deal with the COVID component. They made it through 2020, and then you start to see it really die off in 21, where it really starts to tighten up again. And so I think those aspects have had a big impact on a lot of the consolidation, plus all of the consolidation at retail. Right,
Hmm.
there's so much happening right now, and retailers are getting much more sophisticated and using, things such as headset to really say, look, here is the data, here's what's selling. We're only going to put things on the shelf now that sell. And so I think the confluence of all these events is leading to, what we're experiencing right now.
Hmm. Well, I'm curious on the retail piece. How is it selling into retailers? Do bud tenders, do the general managers, do they have a good understanding of capsules and tablets as a whole and what you're creating, or how is that sales process?
Fortunately, now it's a lot. People get it. We've been around long enough. We've been established. People have tried the product. They know the quality they're going to get, the experience they're going to get every time. So they understand that. And there's been enough, consumption of it that we're not out there trying to explain to people what it was. When we first launched
Hmm.
these, there was people were like, okay, we'll try them, but we had a ton of pushback. Oh, no way are we doing pills? We're never bringing those in. Consumers don't want those, blah, blah, blah. So it's been a really long process of education around, A, the form factor, B, the use case of it, and C, why we chose to do it, and, what the ultimate intention of us going down this initial path is.
Hmm. Yeah. So one of the other interesting things that I'm wondering if this kind of is part of the education piece as you're going into retailers or perhaps on the consumer side. So with capsules, it's really interesting because you can have so much, the milligram of THC that you can have in a capsule is significantly higher than, let's say, an edible, where right it's a 10
Mhm.
milligram dose, 100 milligram package. Now the regulations around capsules is a lot higher. It's let me just make sure I'm getting this right. 1,000 milligrams per package, right?
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, we're seeing a lot more manufacturers push higher and higher on the dosage
Mhm.
side for capsules. And for y'all, you have the ProTab 100, which is the 100 milligrams of THC per serving. And then you've got the other ProTab products that'll range from 0 to 25 milligrams per serving. So I'm just
Mhm.
wondering, what is that strategy? What are the use cases in terms of people using a low dose versus a high dose?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just, it's not in our ProTab line, but we also have a sublingual tablet that's 5 milligrams.
Hmm.
So we do actually have a much, much lower dose for that route of administration. I think, most people, um, it depends. Yeah, it definitely depends on the use case. For individuals that may have some very serious medical condition or in a lot of pain or have severe sleep issues, they might gravitate towards, 100 milligrams, whether it's the ProTab or it's a hash tab, and because they need that amount. Or you have other power users that they have very high tolerances, or their ECS is such that small amounts of cannabis doesn't really get them to the effect that they're looking for. So those users really are what are driving these, the heavier consumption in the 100 milligrams per serving, which I can't take. Like, I'd be high for days if I took something like that. But there's absolutely a market for it. And
Yeah.
then for the ProTab 25, it's scored, so you can split it in half, so you get 12.5 milligrams. So we did that so people who are used to eating two 5 milligram or one 10 milligram gummy, they can split it in half and have about the same potency. Um, and or people who want to go through their day and maybe they've been working all day and they're sore, but they still need to focus. A lot of them find that 25 milligram range for them allows them to still work and not be to the point where like, oh, you know what, I'm high and I just shot my afternoon and I can't do that. So, definitely different use cases depending on the individual.
Yeah, I would imagine with a capsule and with a tablet, someone who's consuming that, I don't know if this anecdotal kind of data, but it would seem to me that it's going to be a more medical use or more treating some particular ailment or something very specific, as opposed to more of a recreational experience or high. Is that kind of what you're seeing? And is that kind of how you focus the messaging or?
I mean, we don't really focus on the messaging at the higher doses, and try and delineate how the use case is. I think it's really around the dosage. When you have individuals that are taking 100 or hundreds of milligrams, they understand their dosage and they know exactly what dosage they need to achieve what it is they're trying to do. And so it's really just around dosage. And unfortunately for individuals that are taking high doses of cannabis, they tend to be price sensitive because it can get very, very expensive, especially with taxes and everywhere the industry is at the moment. So those tend to be much more of the price conscious consumers, that are taking much higher doses that way. And so that's how we go about it. It's hard for us to really differentiate who's taking it medically or say recreationally, if you will, but because that really happens at the end at retail. So
Mhm.
when we manufacture, we're not delineating which pipeline it's going into.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about the formulations that you have, because there's a lot of different y'all are using, and as I understand it, you kind of pioneered, or I don't know if pioneered is the right word, but you're using a lot more than just some of the basic cannabis compounds. So CBG, CBN, CBDA, THCA. How do you formulate your products? What is the thought process that goes into creating them? How do you decide, what cannabinoids and the ratios that you're going to put in the products?
Yeah. So when we started down this road, we looked at the three major biomolecule classes that cannabis produces, right? It produces tons of different compounds, but it's cannabinoids, terpenoids, and flavonoids. Flavonoids are super interesting. You can get them in lots of different foods, and other dietary supplements. So we were like, okay, we won't focus on those. Plus, we didn't have any confidence they would actually modulate effect. Then you have terpenoids, right? And terpenoids really help delineate sativa to indica as an effect, right? Because you can use the same cannabis input and modulate effect through terpenoids. So that's interesting, but it's less impactful. So we decided early on we're going after cannabinoids because that's where we felt we could really modulate effect and differentiate it. So you would take two different products and say completely different. Whether you liked them or not, you could unequivocally understand they were different. And so starting with that, I spent years in the literature. What did we know? What do we know about all the different cannabinoids? And then you looked at what we knew empirically, right? 20 years of a mature, gray market in California under Prop 215. What information could we glean? And then it was a lot of trial and error. And so I essentially just built a model that weighted these in different ways. And you had a Venn diagram, and we'd say, cool, we want to go after energy, for instance. And you'd take those three spheres and right in the center, kind of that's the sweet spot. That's what we would try and target. And so that's kind of been our guiding principle. And 6 years in, we also just now have a lot of experience with different cannabinoids, and then also a lot of data we've collected internally through surveys, product development. We actually are running a fully IRB approved clinical trial right now. So we're using a lot of different methods so we can collect data back. So then we can keep iterating, and create products that we know will deliver on what we say they'll do.
Has there been anything interesting that you've found in the learnings or the research thus far?
Yes, a lot. There's a lot of interesting things. Some of it's very confusing still, right? And so it can be still pretty rudimentary. But it is interesting to see when you start modulating or trying to use different cannabinoids to modulate, how much you actually do need or don't need, and how that changes across product classes, right? Is it ingestible? Is it a vape? Is it, flower? And so, circling back to all that, if we want to start honing in on how we target effects, we have to understand the individual cannabinoids. And it's one of the reasons why in our product line, yes, you can get heavy Delta 9, sativa, hybrid indica, hash tabs, but that's why we also put either highly enriched or isolate isolated cannabinoids on the market, so people can actually try it too and say, oh wow, that's an interesting effect, or I really want to try CBG. And then it allows us to then formulate with them, and then we can really try and understand how they impact each other in a specific formulation for targeted effect.
And how far along would you say as an industry and someone, especially with your background, how much research do we have yet? Do we know a lot about the effects of the different compounds and what people are going to be using them to treat, what ailments and so forth?
No, I mean, we have a I think a pretty good understanding empirically, right? So qualitatively, we have a lot of information. Quantitatively, not a lot. And a lot of companies such as ours and others are pushing towards getting peer-reviewed, rigorously collected data that we can then use to make informed decisions moving forward. But there's a ton of research that we still have to do. And part of the challenge with that, and it's the magic of cannabis itself, is cannabis and cannabinoids, they're fairly non-specific. So when you take them, they don't act at just one system in your body. They kind of infect a lot of different systems foundationally, and that has really typically positive cascading effects, and it will help you ultimately. But on the flip side of it, it makes it really challenging to formulate with and be very specific, because now you're going to have a lot of non-specificity in target, and so other things can happen. And this is why cannabis can do things like, yeah, it really helps your pain, but it could make you paranoid, tired, or hungry. Right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm always reminding myself, and I will write a lot about this. We just we're just being born as an industry, right? Like we don't know fully what cannabis means for our whole society on so many different levels yet. And so I just feel like it's a good reminder, especially in a market like California, where everything feels like it's stacked up against you if you're running a business in this industry. And it's just a good reminder to kind of take a step back and remember, like, we don't know what we don't know yet, and there's just so much we don't know. And so just kind of level setting our own expectations, I think makes it a lot easier, probably a lot healthier for us as individuals who are working in this industry and really navigating the ups and downs. And I'm curious, like, you kind of touched on it. It's no secret. You see so many headlines in the media these days about how tough of a market California is. And so I'm just curious, from your experience of it through the pandemic, especially, how have things been, and how are you looking at 2022 and even 2023?
yeah, it's a great question. As with for everybody, 2020 was really challenging. Fortunately, we did very well as a company. And for us, that's pretty amazing because, we founded the company in San Francisco. This company existed in a 2,000 square foot building in Soma, like 7th and Howard in San Francisco, for 5 years. And we had to navigate 2020 during that time. So we, very small space. So we had to do SKU rationalization just to get stuff to market because of social distancing and all the constraints that San Francisco put on us. And at the same time, we were managing a build out of our new facility in Santa Rosa. So it was good for us because we were already moving to a zone of just very focusing on very certain things. And so the pandemic helped us accelerate that. We learned very quickly the things we were doing operationally very well and which ones we were doing very poorly, so we could course correct the things we needed to. And then so we had good growth in 2020, and we were able to manage it, and then continue that through last year. I think to your point, all of us are hoping at some point in the nearest future, things will change drastically, right? 280E will go away. We'll have access to traditional banking. It'll be decriminalized at the federal level, right? And that these things will actually happen quicker. But the thing about cannabis is it's just a slow grind, and it takes a very long term and long vision to navigate it, I think, and to navigate it successfully. And so, for us, I didn't come into this. I founded the company when I was 40, and I didn't come in and say, I'm gonna sell this for some multiplier in 3 years. I came in and said, I'm gonna do a 10-year build. I'm gonna build something for 10 years, and I want to see where it's at that point. if I didn't had I not come in with that mindset, I never would have lasted this long, right? And so that's kind of the thing that's really helped me get through. And then it also helps guide us on the decisions we make and the strategy we take, and and the ability to try and be patient through this incredibly, you know, challenging times and industry. So
Yep.
so looking forward to 2022, it's the same mindset for us. We think it's going to be good in certain ways, and in other ways we know it's going to be really hard. I think the industry is really going to struggle this year. I think we're
Hmm.
going to see a lot more consolidation, especially at retail, and that's going to have these downstream effects that or upstream effects that really affect, you know, brands. And then yeah, just look what's happening to the flower market right now. Like
I
what's going to
know.
happen with pricing in this industry over the next year and the tax burden. So yeah, take
Yeah.
your pick, but you know.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it really is, it is just so, it's not one thing that's happening there. It's on every level of that can be a challenge in this industry. It is a lot of what we hear. And I recently joined or was elected to the board of directors of the CCIA.
Mhm.
And a lot of what the members are talking about, they've kind of boiled it down to a handful of things that they need from the state, and that would be tax relief. So, eliminating the cultivation tax, having broader tax reform just to general cannabis taxes, as well as you mentioned with retail, it's opening up access because in California, we've got what, 850 ish storefronts that open and
Mhm.
operating at this point, 300 plus delivery licenses. But that's 1/3 of the state that has access to legal retail. And you mentioned earlier, pre Prop 64, we had 3,000 dispensaries throughout California. And so now when you move that down to 850, it's really created an uneven marketplace. So the brands, what I've seen develop is it's a lot harder on the brand side pitching into 850 stores because the stores are being inundated with a bunch of different sales pitches. They don't really know how to differentiate so many different brands that are competing for their attention. So it's just made it so challenging on the brand side. And then you couple in all those other issues that you mentioned, the taxes, the illicit market, the cost of compliance because our regulations
Mhm.
keep changing. And then, just the industry still growing up together. We're having people come in from different industries with different skill sets that are helping things mature. But it's on every level of what could make a business challenging to run. That's
Mhm.
that's really happening in this industry. But just with that, like, is there anything you can pinpoint that you think are the things that need most relief to be able to help 2022 be a little bit easier to operate a business in?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, yeah, tax relief. Like tax relief is the biggest thing because it's insane the amount of taxation that happens. And then, you know, and then the state's like, "Oh, hey, guess what? It's January 1st, 2022. We're going to increase leaf tax by,
Yeah.
some X percent." And prices are falling. Operators have spent all this time trying to get into the system. The state keeps saying, we want everyone to come in and play in the regulated framework, but they've made it impossible. And so that taxation is the thing that has to be looked at. And then yeah, there's no retail access. There isn't. And yeah, Prop 215, you said 3,000. I think that's a pretty good number. I've heard people estimate up to 5,000, so you had so many retail outlets available during the Prop 215 days, and they just all went away. And now we just have so many deserts still in this state. And there's so many places that, consumers still have no ability to buy regulated cannabis because municipalities aren't opening them up. And guess what? Now it's going to be even harder to open them because provisional licensing is going away in a few months. And so
Hmm.
the barrier to entry is going to go through the roof. And we haven't even started to address fundamentally the things that need to be done. So um, I actually, Director Elliott, she was also the director of the Office of Cannabis in San Francisco. So I had the opportunity to get to know her pretty well from 2017 through 2019. And, I told her even before Prop 64, I was like, this is an experiment. Like California, this is going to be a crazy experiment. And there's no guarantees it's going to be successful. You can define what success is, but at the end of the day, you know, does the, how does the industry move forward? And for all of us who are stakeholders at the table trying to build something that we think reflects what it is that we've put our heart and soul into, we don't know what this is going to look like and how successful it's actually going to be. And, so we're all still out there fighting, trying to get it, trying to move it forward.
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean that's the I think right perspective to have. It's again what I'm reminding myself of. We don't know what we don't know, and we don't know a lot at this point. So let's just be humble and kind of remember that we're all in this learning together and share as much information with each other that we can. And so thank you for opening up and kind of giving your honest, perspective here, because that's part of why I wanted to start this podcast and just share these insights, because my partner who I'm going to be interviewing next week, he's also been in the industry for a really long time. He co-founded Guild Extracts, and I'm seeing every day the things that he goes through to survive and make it in this industry, and it's unbelievable. We could write a book on the amount of stories that of just it's the craziest things happen, because you're putting people in these situations that are just so challenging and so many unknowns that we just don't know how to operate in, that a lot of people, it really tests your ego. It really pushes you in a place that you've probably never been before. And so people are learning to kind of how they're going to handle certain situations. And then you take that to scale, and I think that's in part why you get a lot of what's happening in our industry right now. A lot of the combativeness, a lot of the challenges, there's just so much struggle right now. But
It is, and yeah, and I think it's compounded by the fact that California, you just have it's this hyper fierce competitive market, right? And so the flip side of this, or one small silver lining for those brands, I think, that can be successful in the long term in California, it really sets them up for then taking their ethos of what they created here, brands, products, and exporting that outside across the country, because they will be in the position best to do that. But then it's, there's a bit of sadness too, because there's so many people that weren't able to make the transition for whatever reason, and we're just pushed out. And so it's definitely bittersweet operating in this industry. And so I think for us, it's really, what is our intention? What is our mission? What are we going to do to satisfy that, but still know that we're contributing and giving more to the industry than we're trying to take from it. And so,
yep. Well, to end on a more positive note, so what are you excited about? What's going to be going on for Level in this next year?
yeah, really excited about some new product lines coming out. So you had kindly talked about the ProTab Plus. Very excited. This is another iteration for us on effects-based cannabis. So these are being really well received in the market, not only through retail but through consumers. And fundamentally, we are not we occupy a position, and I really like the space we're in, this tablet space. But we're not a tablet company. We are a cannabinoid company. And so I'm agnostic to the delivery vehicle in which we put cannabinoid formulations on the market. We've hyper focused on this one to build and develop and test the thesis. But we have some other product classes coming out over the next year that I'm very, very, very excited about in California. And then we're also expanding outside the borders of California this year. So we'll be opening 2 states this year, and I'm very, very excited about that.
Nice. Can you share
Yeah.
which states those are?
Not at the moment, I can't.
Okay.
But
No worries. Yeah. And
yeah.
so with the formulations, does that mean, so do you white label your formulations out? Can other manufacturers use any of your formulations to create their products, or is that all proprietary information that you are going to use only for your own products?
Yeah, it's only going to be proprietary for us. So we're partnering with other single state operators that we have either good relationships with, or we think that we can leverage both of our expertise and come in, and we'll actually manufacture under their license in that state. And so,
Right on.
yeah.
Cool. Well, Chris, thank you so much. This is really insightful. It's really interesting to follow what's been going on in capsules and tablets. Certainly, a newer cannabis category, I think, for a lot of people. But really appreciate all of the insights that you shared. I think it's going to be super helpful and insightful for people that may be interested in trying a capsule or tablet for the first time, or people who are looking at investing or creating a product here. So thank you for everything that you've shared with us today. Any closing thoughts from your end?
No, again, it takes everyone, where we all have to build a scale-free network in this industry to really propel it forward, especially I think maintaining the ethos and the integrity that we want done. So it takes all parties. So I think, thank you for doing this, for creating a platform in which, you can not only educate the cannabis world on, the tools and things that are available to help us scale businesses, but also that, at the end of the day, as much as numbers are important, there's also a human component to this, right? And that's something we can't lose in this industry, and something I know a lot of us fight for. So, thank you for providing me an opportunity to come on your platform and have a chat with you. And yeah, it's great to meet you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And that's been, I've been in the industry for about 4 years now. And when I first would go out and kind of be talking about the trends that we're seeing, I'm like, you know what? Like a lot of this, it's so fascinating, just everything that I'm learning at Headset and reading all the reports and whatnot. But I'm like, this really, there's so much more context that is necessary when looking at the data because every state is so different. The operators that are in that state, the knowledge that exists within that state, how the supply chain is set up, the regulations, all of that, it really makes a difference in the data that we see. And without that context, again, that's why I wanted to kind of kick this off and understand from people who are creating these companies, like help put context to the data because it requires that at this point because we're so early. So again, yeah, thank you for the compliment and thank you for being here to share.
Yeah, great.
Wonderful.
Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. Bye.
The High Ground podcast is produced in partnership with TRICHOMES.com. Special thanks to the TRICHOMES production team, our executive producer, Claudio Miranda, and to all our incredible guests who make this show possible. My name is Jocelyn Schultrot, your host, and I look forward to joining you all in the next episode.